So how did the Supreme Court set it up for authoritarians to take over America? Check this out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. And just to jump right to the end and give you the whole thing in advance, I'm arguing here that Donald Trump wouldn't even be in office. Like the Mercers wouldn't have been able to funnel all this dark money into Cambridge Analytica and Facebook and all these other. Donald Trump wouldn't even be in office had the Supreme Court not, back in 1976 and 78, said it's okay if rich people own politicians. Bribery is now legal in the United States. And then, of course, they doubled down on it in 2010 in Citizens United. That it would not even be possible. So here we are. What do we do about this? Obviously, my solution, and I've talked about this a number of times, is we need to figure out ways to overturn those Supreme Court decisions. I think it can be done both through a constitutional amendment and through law, but those are the things that are right on the tip of my tongue. Other possibilities, serious criminal prosecutions, scare the malefactors. Is this something the Biden administration is willing to do? And if so, how? How do you go about it? Where do you go with all this? But, basically just let me lay out a piece of this concept that I think is completely absent from the corporate media, from the mainstream media, from pretty much any. I have not even seen this discussed once. In the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Financial Times, the Guardian, the papers that I read every day, I've not seen it discussed once. And that is the problem in the United States of chronic criminals, of professional criminals, of lifelong criminals. Now, I mean this really seriously. Back when I think I was 20, 21 years old, it was right around the time Louise and I first got married. And I had a job for about 6 months. It was a let's get health insurance job, we were just starting a family, and as the manager at the GNC store in the local mall in Okemos, Michigan. I did that for about 6 months, and then I got a gig down in Detroit as an engineer for RCA, and we moved down to Detroit, and that's where our first child was born. But I had to. Louise and I had this small business, and the business kind of crashed and burned, and so I got this job as a manager at GNC. And one of the most fascinating parts of it was this thing called the Reid Report. It was an honesty test that I had to give to prospective employees. Part of my job was hiring new people, and there was constant churn. It was a low-paid job, and it was in a mall, and it was out of town, and all this kind of stuff. And the honesty report asked questions like, one of your very best employees just came in and tried to give you $200 or to put it back in the till, and said that she had been smuggling the money out of the till because she had an emergency medical procedure that her child needed. Now, keep in mind, this was 40 years ago. $200 is like $2,000 in today's money. So she had this emergency procedure that her child needed. She borrowed it from the till, from the company, and now she's paying it back. What do you do? And, it was a multiple choice question. Do you thank her for the money? Do you tell her no, do it again? Do you have sit her down and decide whether you can keep her as an employee? Do you call the police? Those, as I recall, those were the choices. There was another one. Your mother just called and told you that she's been shoplifting at the local store because her food stamps are just not going far enough, and your little sister is hungry. What do you do? And, of course, one of the answer possibilities was call the police, turn in my mother. So I go to Len Kugler was the guy who was the manager now. I think he worked his way up to like some kind of senior vice president at GNC. And I went to Len and I said, I couldn't pass this honesty test. You've got to lie to pass the honesty test. What? This is crazy. And he said, no, Thom, what you're missing, he says, of course you couldn't pass the honesty test if you answered honestly. But we don't expect you to honestly answer the honesty test. We expect you to lie on it. And I'm like, you expect me to lie on the honesty test? He's like, yeah, there are people. And he said, the fact that you're objecting to this tells me you're not one of them. But there are people, and it's a small percentage of the population, but they're real and they're out there, who either A, don't know the difference between right or wrong, so they don't know how to lie to pass the honesty test. And we definitely want to weed them out. Or people who simply think the rules don't apply to them. They've been able to avoid the rules their whole entire life. And so what this test does is it flags those people. And I was like, wow. And that was the first time in my life it had hit me that there were some people, and I had known maybe one in junior high school and high school, who would go out of his way to do things that were wrong or illegal, rather, even when it was easier to do the things that were right and legal, just for the joy of breaking the law. And so now, you look at what's going on right now, and it seems to me fairly obvious Donald Trump is one of those people. He's one of those people who, A, never internalized the importance of right from wrong, and B, while he understands the concept, doesn't believe it applies to him. Which brings us to the Supreme Court. What the Supreme Court did in 76 and 78 with the Buckley decision, the Bellotti decision, and then in 2010 with the Citizens United decision, is created a giant magnet in Washington, D.C., and every state capital around the country for people like Donald Trump, for lifelong grifters and criminals. And so here we are, 60 years later, I guess, since the Buckley decision, 55 years since the Buckley decision, and we're noticing that, particularly in the Republican Party, which has embraced this wholeheartedly, but also there's a few in the Democratic Party, that there's a bunch of people in Congress who would just as soon lie to our faces as do what's right. If we do not reverse these decisions, and by the way, H.R. 1, the first piece of legislation that Nancy Pelosi got out of the House of Representatives 2 years ago, we have a new Congress now today. But the first piece of legislation addressed this, not in whole, but in part. It addressed this issue. But this has to be job one.